So we'll talk of, this is going to be an introductory talk on JavaScript, programming language JavaScript. JavaScript is going to be embedded into another programming language called HTML, hypertext markup language. So we'll start off talking about client-side and server-side programming, and then we'll get into JavaScript and we'll talk about data types, which are like numbers and strings. So when you go to a web page, you see stuff on your screen, right? So when you go to a web server, like what's a popular web server now? It seems like Facebook isn't so popular anymore. What's popular these days? Anybody?
Amazon.
Okay, all right. So if you went to Amazon's webpage, you would type www.amazon.com, you'd hit enter. You're sending a message from your computer or phone with a client to the Amazon server. They're sending a file back to you, and something appears on your screen. The file coming back to you is written in a language called HTML, hypertext markup language. And the way the language works, this is like an oversimplified version of it. It's made up of a bunch of tags. So the first tag is the HTML tag, meaning this is an HTML file. So the way the tagging, they decided back in the 1980s or maybe even the 70s, when you have a tag, you start the tag and then you end the tag. And the way tags end is they have a slash plus their tag name. So you have a tag called HTML, and then you start printing out some HTML stuff. And then when you're done, you say, here's the end of the HTML. Okay? There's two major parts to a web page. There's the head part, which, if this was an HTML course, we'd talk about a lot of what goes on in the head part. But just for now, we'll say, in the head part, we could do some checking. Like, for example, if you went to Amazon.com, it might first ask you to log in. Once you log in, then it'll say, welcome, Joe, and if you want to start, then it'll say the stuff that's in your cart and information about you. But they would only know that if you've already logged in. So as you go hopping to other pages, in the header section, we could check, hey, are you logged in? If you're logged in, you're allowed to see what's in the body. But if you're not logged in, it'll say, oh, you must log in to see this. So that checking is done in the head, and the head is not stuff that you see on your screen. What's in the body is what you see on your screen. But right now, for our purposes, the head could be empty here. So then in the body, well, so the head starts here. We could do some head checking stuff if we wanted to, and then we end the head. If the head checks out okay, then the body will arrive, and then that's what will be displayed on the screen. So now we have a body tag. The body starts here, and the body ends here. Slash body means the end of it. And in this case, like I said, this is not an HTML course, so you don't have to learn this stuff. It's just an idea of what goes on with HTML. Someone came along back in the 1980s and said, we're going to have, like, if we want to have a big header, we can have like header 1, header 2, header 3. I think they go up to about 5. Does anyone know how many headers the print keeps? 6? Okay. So the print keeps getting smaller and smaller. So H1 is like the biggest print. So we have header 1, and we type in some text, and we say, and that's the end of header 1. Then we can start a paragraph. They decided paragraphs are P's. Here's a paragraph. We type in some stuff and say, here's the end of the paragraph. And now here's the end of the body, and now here's the end of the HTML file. So the web server, some programmer coded this and sends this file to you. On your screen, it would look like this. You don't see this printed out on your screen because this looks ugly. It'll look like this. Welcome to my web page, in big letters, because it's a header 1. And then in smaller paragraph letters, glad you could be. Okay. So that's typical, and then you have to name the file. It's common to name the initial file index.html, because if you go to a web server like Amazon.com, you don't say Amazon.com/ and the file name that you're interested in. You don't know the file name. You just remember Amazon.com. So it's common to call the first file the index, index.html. So if you don't specify which file you want, we're going to send you by default the index. Okay, so this is just, very intro to HTML. So here's what's happening. Here's you, the client, and you're sending a message to a server. So you could be on the client here in New Jersey. You could be sending it to Amazon. Anyone know where Amazon is? They're everywhere.
Robbinsville.
What's that?
Robbinsville.
The servers are, or the?
Oh.
Okay, well, what?
Like the Midwest somewhere.
Okay, they're probably scattered. They probably have many servers. But anyway, so if you send a message to their server, you might think, well, if they have an HTML file, like this, they'll just send it right back, as is. But, and that's actually, when the internet first came out, or first became public in 1992, that's the way it worked. The HTML file would just be sent right back to you. So you would connect to the server and send the file right back to you. Doesn't have to do any kind of program. Later in probably JavaScript came out around 1995, and PHP first stands for personal homepage. The first server-side programming language came out around 95, 96. So now what we could do is, before you just get that HTML file back and have it display on your screen so you could read it, we could do some programming on the server. The server could do some programming, and then in addition to that, on your client, on your machine, programs could run on your machine. So, so for example, if you wanted to type in your login and password, you would send your login and password to the server. Now the server has to connect to some kind of a database. When you originally opened up your account, you told them what your password is. They have to match the one you typed in today to the one that's in their database. So they have to run code while you're trying to log in. They took your email and password, ran through a database, found your email, found the password that goes with it. Maybe they had to do some encryption algorithm too, because they want to encrypt your password. And then they have code that says if the password matches, then send a web page back to them, mark them as logged in, and send a page back to them saying you're logged in. If the password doesn't match, send them an error message saying your password's no good, try again. So this, they can't just send back an HTML file, they have to now run code on the server, make a determination, is this really you, and if so, send a page back to you. So the steps would be, you request, you're a client, step one, you request a page from the server. The server then takes the page that you're trying to request, and possibly, doesn't have to be, and for about the first 3 or 4 years the internet was public, there was no program. But it's possible they could run a program. So the runtime engine will run a program possibly making determinations of what to send back to you. And then it produces an HTML page, runs all the server code while creating the page, then determines, based on the outcome of the code, the runtime engine sends the page back to the client. That might be a page that says, your password's no good, try again. It could be that they check your password's fine, and they pull your first name out of the database, has your first name, your last name, and it says, welcome Mary, because they know your password's correct. The page comes back to you in the form of HTML, and then also around 1995, a little bit after HTML was being used for a few years, someone thought, I might want to put programs running on the client machine. So if you've ever gone to web pages like here at the college, you go to the web page and it has like 6 or 7 pictures in the middle, and the pictures, after about 5 seconds, the picture changes to another picture, and it goes through, rotating through the pictures. So that's a program that's running on your machine, not running on the server. That's running on your machine. So the server sent you an HTML page, and then it sent you 7 pictures, and then it has a program running on your machine that says count to 5 and then change to the new picture. Count to 5, change to the new picture. So now a program is running on your machine. So step 5, the client, that's you, that's your machine, the client interprets and displays the HTML pages, executing client-side JavaScript statements running on your machine. So this is now what's going on. This pretty much has been the case since about 1997. This is the way web pages worked. So, just to show an example of server-side programming, the first server-side programming language was a language called PHP, which stands for Personal Homepage. And the person who created this said, you know, wouldn't it be nice if I could go to a web page and it'll display like the current weather in my town and what was the score of the hockey game last night from my town. So you can have a program run that says, go get the most recent data and then display that. Don't just display stale data from the last time the page was created. So we could have an HTML page, but now to alert the server that there's code in the page that needs to run on the server before it's sent back to the client, we'll change the name of the file. So instead of calling it index.html, we'll call it index.php. That's a signal to the server. There might be some code in here that you have to run on the server before you send the answer back, before you send the HTML page back. So we could have a page. Now in this page, the head is missing. Head is optional. We have HTML, and now here's the body. The body says, like before, welcome to my web page, as a big header. And then it says, today is. Now suppose you had a web page and you wanted it to say today is Wednesday, right? But if somebody came to your page 2 days later, you want it to say today is Friday. So you don't want to type in today is Wednesday and hit save on the server, then it'll tell everybody it's Wednesday all the time. You want to have the server do a lookup at the moment they come to your page and determine what day is it, and then whatever day it is, tell them it's that day. So that's going to require code. So around 1996, 1997, a new tag was added, and the tag is $PHP. I think they put the question mark in because paragraph starts with a P, so they wanted to make it different. I'm not really sure what the point of the question mark is. And then what you could do is you could say echo, and then in parentheses, date. That means today's date, and there are many parameters you can put in the date. If you want to know for today's date, you want to know what date, what month is it, what day is it, what year is it, what hour is it, what minute is it. Really, date can get you the up to the minute time, and then you could ask any parameter you want. And it turns out you have to just look it up on a chart. The small l means the day of the week. So if this file was saved on the server, right, like Amazon.com, if they had code like this on it, what would happen on the server is before the server wouldn't send this to you, the client. The server would read through this and go, ah, this is server code. This is PHP code. This is normal HTML, so I'm just going to send that as is. But this is server code, so it will remove this. Everything that's in red will get removed from the file, and this program will run. And this program basically just says print out whatever today's date is. So today's Wednesday. This will all be removed, and the word Wednesday would show up here. So when it goes to the client, that's you, it would look like this. This is what you would receive. You would receive, welcome to my web page, in big letters. Today is Wednesday. That's what you, the client, receives. You won't receive this. You won't receive this stuff. This stuff will be taken away and replaced with Wednesday. So if you came back to this web page on Friday, this will be taken away and replaced with Friday. So this is code that's asking the server has a clock on it. It's asking the server, what is today's day of the week? And whatever that echo means, print out the result. So the result would get printed right here. So that computation would be done on the server. Right? So we're saying, you're asking, this is you send a message to Amazon. Amazon as a runtime message finds the page, the runtime engine produces the HTML page, runs all server code to create it. So what it did was, it ran this is code, and it ran on the server. The results of the code were plugged back into this spot. So when this came out in around 1997, people then thought, oh wow, this is huge, because I could do lots of stuff in here. I could log into another server, read through its database, and then put all the results and put it all back here. So if you've ever if you go to Amazon.com and you do a search on computers, they can take what you typed in, go into their database, and get all the products that they sell that have to do with computers, and print them all here. And now all of a sudden you get a web page, all the computers they sell. And then that's what comes back to you. Okay, so that's server side. That we'll learn very shortly. That has nothing to do with JavaScript. But so what you would end up receiving as the client, you get a file that looks like this. It just says today is Wednesday, and this is what would appear on your screen. If you came back on Friday, it would just say today is Friday. Say today is Friday. Okay. So now let's go back to, instead of a PHP web page with server code that runs on the server, we could have a file, an HTML file, that has a body. It says, welcome to my web page. Today is, now we're going to learn what this stuff means in the next couple of classes, right? This is JavaScript code. But anyway, in case you're curious today, basically we're going to talk about variables in a little while. We made a variable called weekdays, and we've made an array, so Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Sunday to Saturday. Then we had another variable, we asked the date. We can say, what is today's day? And unfortunately in JavaScript, instead of saying today is Tuesday, it says today is 2. So, right, so 0 is Sunday, 1 is Monday, 2 is Tuesday. And then we print out, we go through the array for that particular day, we print out its name. So it's a little, this exercise I wanted to do, just say today is Tuesday. It's a little clumsy in JavaScript. Okay, and then instead of saying echo, which is what you do in PHP to print something on the screen, we say document.write, and then we print out whatever it is we're printing out. So the tag that was added to HTML to handle JavaScript, so that's a program that's running on the client, that's your machine, not Amazon. It starts with script, and it ends with /script, and then you put in all the code. Now when you receive this file from the server, this code will be in it, because they're giving you the code. It's going to run on your machine. So it comes exactly like this, same exact file. You can, if you view the source code that came to you, you will see the script in it. And it would look like this. Right, so now, okay, so now I did something a little bit interesting. I gave an example where the file could have server-side code in it. So that means code that runs on the server replaces the code before it sends it out to you. And it came back saying, today is Wednesday. Okay. Then I said we could do the same thing, but instead of figuring out what day of the week it is on the server, the server could just send it to your computer, and you could figure out what day of the week it is, and you'll figure it out. So when this code displays on your web browser knows, don't display this, don't take this out and print it on the screen. Take this code and run the program and replace the results with whatever goes there. But then I said, just to be different, I said it's going to print out today is Thursday. So here's an interesting issue. Suppose you're in New Jersey, which is Eastern time in the USA, and your server is in Arizona. Right? Does anyone ever use GoDaddy as a hosting service? Okay, they're in Arizona. So I know I've hit this problem once. They're in Arizona is sometimes 2 hours behind us, sometimes 3, because Arizona doesn't use daylight savings time. You guys know that?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's the only state that does it. So sometimes they're 2 hours behind us, sometimes 3 hours behind us. Okay, so anyway, if you had server-side code that calculated what day it is, and you went to the web page at 1:30 a.m. in New Jersey, what day is it in Arizona at 1:30 a.m. in New Jersey? If it's Thursday morning.
Wednesday there.
What?
Wednesday there.
It's Wednesday night there. So if you had a web page that used server-side programming to figure out what day it is, it's going to ask the server in Arizona, what day is it? The server's going to say it's Wednesday. And you're going to see Wednesday. But if you decided to write your code using JavaScript, the client side, and you saved it out on the server in Arizona, and then you were in New Jersey and you read the file's going to come to your machine, and your machine is going to ask your machine, what day is it? And your machine's going to say Thursday. So it might say Wednesday or it might say Thursday, depending on whether you use server-side or client-side script. Does that make sense? So it's just something to think about. It would be better to say the date rather than say today is Thursday, because then it's Thursday according to who. So. Okay, so what I'd like to do is there are tools on the internet where, if you wanted to, you could type in some code. The code that would go, there'll be a web page where we can type in code like this and test it out. We want to test out our JavaScript code. So what it really means is this is supposed to be embedded into an HTML file and then embedded inside a script tag, a script to the end of script tag. And so what we could do, and you guys could do this along with me if you want, we could go to JavaScript. Test. Let's see how to test. Okay. So there's some tools. So this one is www.webtoolkit.online.com/javascript.tester.html. But you could find that there's a lot of good ones online. And so what we can do is, maybe I'll make this a little bigger. What we can do is we could say, okay, so this is, now like I say, this is, what we're testing out here is going to actually be inside an HTML file inside of a script tag. And then this would be the code on the inside. So when the server sends the file to the client sees source, end of source, script, end of script, and runs the code inside the tags. The code runs, and if it has anything that is printing out, that stuff would print out on the screen. So we could have a dialog box that alerts the person there's some kind of an emergency. So I don't know if you guys, I think if you go to the college website right now, today, a pop-up comes that says, like, the elevator's out in the building?
Yeah.
Right, okay, that was yesterday and today. So I don't know if the elevator's still out, but they have a program that's running that says, put an emergency box up and say, I don't know if it's an emergency, but it's just a warning to say, this box is here, and then you have to hit X to be able to go to the website. So that's JavaScript. And they just put that up like yesterday. So one thing we could do is we could just say alert, and it'll say help. And so on this web page, you can scroll down and hit the execute button, and it would say this site says help. So it would kind of show up. It would show up in a dialog box, and you could hit OK to make it go away. Okay. So, so one of the topics we'd like to talk about is in JavaScript, we can use variables. So at this point, we just printed out a string. A string is a collection of letters. So we could use a variable. We could go like this. We could say var message equals. So let me make this a little bit bigger. So now what I'm doing is, so now we're learning the idea of creating a variable and putting a string into it. So now I'm saying there's a variable, I make up the name, like MSG, message, and I say this variable is equal to the string help. And then what I'm going to do, rather than print out the string help, I'm going to say print out the variable MSG. Now again, this would be, in the real world, that would be a script and a slash script around it. And then what this would do, right at that point in the web page, it would print out the word help, right? So you might think, why am I putting in a variable? Why didn't I just leave it the way it is? Well, we might be able to do things later on. Like, I hope that message at the college here that says the elevator is out in one of the buildings. I was at one of the satellite campuses, and everyone logs in and it says there's an elevator out in the building at another campus, and those students really don't care. So hopefully they put code in that says something like, if today's date is between Wednesday and Friday, put this message up, and then eventually the message will go away. But the message could stay up forever if they don't delete it, if they don't take out that script. Okay, so in this case, it might be good to have variables that say, if it's between a certain date, then put the message up. Otherwise, change the message to say, all elevators are fine. So sometimes it's good if you have text that you want to put out on the screen, put it into a variable, and then we could write some code around it later. But what this is basically going to do is it's going to take help, put it into a variable called message for me to use later, and now I'm saying alert message. So I'm just going to print out help. So hopefully nothing changed. Right, and it still prints help. Help with small letter now, because I had big letter before, big H. Okay, so now what I can do is I could add more variables. So does this, so far, this make sense? What a variable's used for? Okay. So now I can now put variables together. I could do this, say help. I can make another variable. Okay. We can make a third variable. Okay. So now Now what have I done?
Hang on, you're missing a
What's that?
equal sign.
Oh, right. Okay, good. Okay. So now I've made two variables. One is help, message one is help, and message two is I need somebody. And then I decided to put message one plus message two. So intuitively, if you were designing this language and you had two strings and somebody plussed them together, added them, what could you do? You can't add them up like numbers. So is there anything else besides putting them next to each other? Anything else we could do? What else could plus mean with two strings? And so really what we're doing is we're concatenating them together, we're making one big string.